Hi, this is Tox from CritsHappen.com. We're back in my game room and we're going to have another critical review today. Today, we're going to look at the Infernal Contraption, which is a card game brought to you by Privateer Press. Now, many of you may know Privateer Press for their miniature games, such as Monster Apocalypse, among others. But this is a unique card game. It is for 2 to 4 players, plays in about 20 to 60 minutes, depending on how many people you have in the game. And they say on the box it's suitable for 10 and up, although I think with the light humor and the artistic drawing, it could be for a little bit less than that. Ninja Zach did check this out. He's only 6 years old. He liked it, found it very interesting. So, wanted to take a moment, walk you through some of the components, show you about some of the role play, and give you some thoughts. More importantly, at the end, you're going to have a chance to win this copy. So stay tuned to understand how you can get in on the contest. And in the meantime, let's take a look at the Infernal Contraption. Okay, so a couple of notes before we get into gameplay and showing you some of the cards. The instruction manual is a single, 2-sided sheet of paper, and that's it. This is a very basic game, very simple game. There's 170 cards total, and inside, ahead of time, 170 cards total is also the initial launch of this, plus some of the cards from its expansion. This is actually the second edition that Privateer Press is releasing. Now, you start the game with a power core in play. And the power core, you will notice, has 4 different purple connections on each side. Those connections are universal joints, so any type of card can connect to it. Now, the whole goal in Infernal Contraption is you're a goblin bodger racing to construct a maniacal machine to consume resources of the other bodgers. The resources being your deck of cards, which all of them get dealt out evenly to all of the players, and it's called your parts pile. If you ever run out of cards in your parts pile, then you are eliminated from the game, and the last goblin bodger standing, or sitting, is the winner. Now, there are different types of cards. There are power cores, which is what each player would start the game with. There are power sources, which are very similar to power cards, but have different connectors and different colors on them. This one has a universal and a green one, which is a gear. But there will be different colors and connectors on that. You'll see, like for this one, the steam turbine has an orange connector, which is a steam pipe, and then the green, which is the gears. Very, very colorful game. There are also contraptions. Contraptions, and you'll notice there are words along here that will have in-game effect, and they are the same thing upside down or right side up. It does not matter. But they have connectors that will only connect to certain pieces. So universal to universal is fine. Anything to universal is fine. But if I want to add this to my machine on this side and I don't have a universal joint, it's got to be a gear. So it's part matching up the right colors and the right connectors. Now, the contraptions need to be attached to a power source, either a power core or one of the other power sources that you can draw during the game. The power core is just what you start with. If they're not attached to a power source, they don't do anything. They just sit there. There are also upgrades. Upgrades have a green border. Same thing, have some type of connectivity on their cards, and will usually modify the contraptions. They do not need to be placed next to a power source to work, but usually will want to be next to a contraption. Then there are consumables. Consumables have like a rust-colored border around them. And again, the text is the same on both sides, so anyone can read it from any direction you're standing at. Consumables are placed as plugs. Now, what do I mean by plug? Well, let's go back a second and assume that I had played this on my machine, the Incantric Disposal. This is my main line. Anything in the main horizontal line from the power core is your main line. Plugs are placed off of the main line, like this. And you can only go one above or one down for a plug. Consumables are a one-time shot. So once they're used and then discarded from play. Hence why they're only allowed as plugs. The upgrades that we showed you before can be placed either in the main line or as a plug, whichever you would like. Depending on your strategy and your placement, that'll determine where you would like to put them. Now, in addition, there's one final really fun type of card, which is a Sabotage. And this is a red border. Now, one of the things that found a little frustrating for me, there's not much of a shade difference between the Consumables and the orange and the Sabotages and the red. I wish that the borders were a little bit more bright. But the sabotages go onto your opponent's machine, not your machine. And they will inflict havoc on your opponent's machine. So essentially what you do is during your turn, you are allowed one card to play for free. So let's assume that was my card. And then from there I can play any additional cards in my hand from the initial 7 that I drew. Each additional card I play, I must discard, or what they call scrap in the game, another card. So if I wanted to put, this is a universal joint, another power source over here, I would then have to discard a card to the main discard pile. I could then put a plug on as a consumable, but I would have to discard another card. So you can play all cards in your hand at one shot, but you're going to have to discard half of them to do that. Now what happens? After you play all of your cards, the joke in the rulebook is you push a button and start your machine. Now your machine resolves from the upmost left to the bottommost right. Meaning, I start, if this was my machine, if there was a card up here as a plug, I would resolve it, then I would resolve the power core, then I would resolve whatever's underneath it. And the power cores and the other power sources don't really do anything other than power your machine. But again, then coming over here to the incantric disposal, this would say scrap a card from my hand, then draw up to 2 cards from your parts pile. So I could scrap, meaning discard a card from my hand, to draw 2 cards from my parts pile. And then I would immediately go down to, which says, choose a Terminator in your opponent's machine and put that card on the bottom of his parts pile, then remove this from the game. Now Terminator is anything in the line that is an endpoint. So this would be a Terminator right now, this would be a Terminator right now, and this would be a Terminator right now. Yes, you can scrap somebody's power core. That is pretty painful. So at the beginning of the game, you may want to start putting things on either side of your power cord just to make sure that you have enough security there. Because if you don't, you have to have other power sources to power your game. But throughout the course of the game, you're going to build more and more contraptions, more and more upgrades, more and more things that go onto your devices, and have people play sabotages onto you, and that doesn't fit on that one, but if it were, it would go like that. And every turn you play your cards, you push your button, you resolve your machine from left to right, and the different effects from the cards will take place, either scrapping your opponent's cards from their parts pile or scrapping them from your parts pile. Now, it is a 2 to 4 player game, and when you push your button at the end of your turn and you enact your machine and start it up, you have to pick a single opponent. It doesn't affect everybody. There are some cards in the game that will allow you to affect other opponents other than the one you chose, but they're very rare and they're very, very low in abundance. So, what do we think? Let's take a look. So that's the Infernal Contraption. Fairly basic game in terms of rules and gameplay. It does take a little bit to get used to just because of the different names of the cards and where you can place them in the line. There are certain rules like we had talked about where consumables are only placed as plugs. The green cards as upgrades can only be placed in the main line or as plugs, don't need to be powered. It takes a little bit to get used to in terms of what needs to be powered, what doesn't need to be powered. And having this many cards in the game from this release, 170 cards, it takes a couple of games to get used to just so you understand what kind of cards are in this deck, how I can place my cards in my machine to wreak the most havoc. I'm going to be very straightforward. I'm giving this one a miss. And the reason I'm going to give this a miss is multiple things. Number one, in a multiple player game, you just end up picking on somebody. So as I mentioned, when you turn your machine on, that's the technical term or technical sound for turning the machine on. When you turn your machine on, you have to pick an opponent. So in a 3-player game, let's assume I picked the player to my left. I've now scrapped a certain number of cards from their deck because of my machine. The next player to go that's not that player, so that player would go and then we go around the table, are going to be kind of inclined to pick on him or the person previous to them. So the person to my right is going to pick on one of those two usually, not me. That tends to force a big problem because it basically becomes a take that game where you're forcing one person out of the game and just process of elimination. It doesn't really get that fun. The person that gets kicked out, and I'm not saying this was me, it was at one point, but I kicked other people out. It gets kind of boring because you have to sit there and wait for the other players to finish the game and wait for them to go. The other reason I'm going to give this a miss, and this was interesting, I tend to rate games that I play based off what I call the phone factor. That means that when we're sitting around a table, pretty much everyone has their smartphone at some point or another, and it's either sitting on the table next to them or in their pocket or whatever. But what I tend to notice is how often do people reach for their phone when it's not their turn? A lot of games have complaints around, I play my turn and I'm just waiting for somebody else to play their turn. And that's what this feels like. Unfortunately, it feels really painful when you do it like this. The format of the game just lends itself to a lot of activity on your turn, and then once you're done, really not much you can do other than discard cards from the effects of your opponent's machine. And you don't even need to be here for that. There's a lot of times where we play where someone got up to get a drink and the person's saying, hey, I'm going to scrap 2 cards from your pile, and they're just taking them off the top of their deck and moving them like that. The other thing, and I love the theme about this, which is probably the most painful part of this, the theme of being a goblin bodger and building a machine and having all this fun with chaos, it's a lot of fun. The artwork is kind of bland, and the coloring is really not as bright as I would hoped, especially when you look at the difference between the brightness of the power supplies and the brightness of the cards. The power supplies are really shiny, to borrow a Serenity term, and the upgrade cards are really not. The upgrades, the contraptions, all the regular cards are kind of bland and rusty looking. And that may have been on purpose with the whole concept of it being a machine, but it did kind of detract a little bit from me in how bright some cards were and how others were just kind of drab. Overall, it is a uniquely fun game at times, but at the end of the day, the amount of time you spend waiting for someone else to do their turn, the little amount of interaction that you have when it's not your turn, just lends itself to a miss, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about contests, because this is one of the first games I've given a miss to in a while. I want you to have the opportunity to prove me wrong. When I provide reviews, I look at my goals to both enlighten and to entertain, to give all of you enough information to say, is this game right for me? Is this something I would be interested in, what I want to do? Well, you may be interested in this game, and I may be wrong. I'm just giving you one man's opinion, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to give me yours. Now, we always do that with you allowing to put blog comments or Facebook comments or Twitter posts or anything like that. But what we're going to do this time is actually going to give you an opportunity to win this game, this actual reviewed copy. What we'd like you to do is take some time and be creative. To me, creativity is a lot of everything. Take some time to think of how you could show us your passion for Crits Happen and what we're doing here. Take some time to make a sign. Take some time to put something on a hot air balloon and launch it. I don't know what it may be, anything creative. But what we want you to do is take a picture of you showing us your passion for Crits Happen, where it either has the Crits Happen name, the web address of critshappen.com, or feel free to print out our logo and put it on something. Heck, you may have even already gotten a t-shirt from our t-shirt store and want to show us something while you're wearing the t-shirt. Whatever it is, get creative. Post a picture of you with your passion for Crits Happen on your website or on your Facebook and share it with us on our Facebook page. Anyone that does this is going to be entered into the drawing, and I will subjectively go ahead and look at them and say who has the most creative in terms of my opinion. Whoever has the most creative is going to win this copy of the game. They'll then be able to play it, take a look at it, see what their opinions are, and I'm going to ask them for a short paragraph that they can give me their opinions, and I will put into the editorial of our blog post. So take some time, get really creative, have a lot of fun. Heck, this game is about being a goblin and just causing chaos. Now, I will ask you and let you know, please stay within the realms of legal rules. Don't go out and do anything illegal. Don't go graffiti anyone's house. Don't do anything that breaks the law. But be creative, be unique, and be genuine. Let us know what your passion is. Share it with us on Facebook through pictures, and we're going to go ahead and pick one lucky winner to go ahead and win this copy of Infernal Contraption. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep rolling those dice. We hope they're all crits.